The observation deck was empty, exactly as Kyreth preferred it. She sat in the corner seat, her crystalline form reflecting the purple and red lights of the nebula outside. Through the massive window, stars scattered across the darkness like dust. She had been watching them for 3 hours now, recording every particle of light, every shift in the cosmic winds. Kyreth belonged to the Virex species. Her people did not have faces like other beings. Instead, their heads were smooth surfaces that shifted with patterns of light when they communicated. They did not speak with mouths or make sounds. They shared thoughts through mathematical codes and pure data streams. Emotions were something they had evolved past millions of years ago. They were efficient. They were logical. They were perfect. Or so Kyreth had always believed. The Galactic Coalition had assigned her to this research station 6 months ago. Her mission was simple: study the humans. These strange new creatures had just joined the Coalition, and nobody quite understood them. They were weak compared to other species. Their bodies broke easily. They needed specific temperatures to survive. They had to consume organic matter multiple times per day just to maintain their energy. By all measures, they should not have survived their own planet, let alone reached the stars. Yet, here they were. Kyreth had spent weeks analyzing their technology. It was crude, but functional. She studied their communication patterns. They were chaotic and inefficient. She observed their decision-making processes. They relied heavily on something they called gut feelings and intuition rather than proper data analysis. Nothing about them made sense from a logical standpoint. The door to the observation deck slid open with a soft hiss. Kyreth did not turn around. Her sensors told her everything she needed to know. 3 human life signs, 2 males, 1 female. Heart rates elevated from walking. Body temperatures normal for their species. She expected them to pass through quickly. Humans were always rushing somewhere, unable to simply exist in a moment. But the footsteps slowed, then stopped. Kyreth finally turned her attention toward them. The humans stood together, looking out at the nebula. The female had dark hair tied back from her face. She wore the blue uniform of the science division. One of the males was tall with broad shoulders, an engineer by his station markings. The other male was smaller, with gentle eyes and the patches of a xenolinguist on his sleeve. The female spoke first. "It never gets old, does it? Looking at something like that?" The engineer nodded. "Makes you feel small. In a good way." The xenolinguist said nothing. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, his eyes reflecting the nebula's colors. Kyreth filed away their words for analysis later. They spoke of feeling small as though it were positive, another human contradiction. She returned her attention to her data collection, assuming they would soon leave. They did not leave. The 3 humans found seats near the window. The female pulled out a small device and began working. The engineer started reading something on his personal screen. The xenolinguist just sat, watching the stars with an expression Kyreth could not categorize. 2 hours passed. Kyreth continued her observations, but she found her attention drifting toward the humans. They barely spoke to each other. They simply existed in the same space, occasionally sharing brief comments about nothing important. The nebula's color, the pattern of stars, the faint outline of a distant planet. When the female and the engineer finally stood to leave, the xenolinguist remained. He shifted to a seat closer to the window, pulling his knees up slightly. Such an odd position for data collection, Kyreth thought, completely inefficient for any kind of work. More time passed. The station's artificial day cycle began to dim the corridor lights, simulating evening. The observation deck's illumination lowered to match. Now only the nebula's glow filled the space, painting everything in shades of violet and deep red. Kyreth noticed the human stand up. She assumed he was finally leaving, but instead he walked toward her section of the deck. Her analytical systems went on alert. Direct interaction had not been part of her observation protocol. The human stopped a respectful distance away. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, his voice soft. Kirith's light patterns flickered with uncertainty. She could refuse, but her mission was to study humans, and refusing interaction would limit her data collection. "You may," she transmitted through the station's translation system. Her words came out of a speaker as flat, emotionless sounds. The human sat down, leaving space between them. He looked out at the nebula again, his expression peaceful. They sat in silence for several minutes. Kirith waited for him to state his purpose, to ask questions, to begin some kind of formal interaction. Instead, he did something completely unexpected. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, the way humans did when they were processing their environment through scent. Then he opened his eyes, turned slightly toward Kirith, and spoke in that same soft voice. "You smell like Earth after rain." Kirith's entire consciousness stuttered. The statement contained no useful information. Earth's atmospheric composition after precipitation was well documented in her databases. Water, ozone, various organic compounds released from soil and plant matter. But why would he mention it? What purpose did this observation serve? And why did he say "smell like" instead of providing actual chemical data? Her light patterns flickered rapidly, a sign of processing confusion that she quickly suppressed. The human noticed anyway. A small smile appeared on his face, gentle and knowing. "Sorry," he said. "That probably doesn't translate well. I'm Do-Yun, by the way. Xenolinguist. I study how different species communicate." He paused. "Or try to communicate anyway." Kirith's systems were still trying to parse his initial statement. Rain, earth, smell. The words connected in her databases but made no sense in this context. "I am Kirith," she transmitted. "Varex research scientist. I am assigned to study human behaviors and capabilities." "Ah," Do-Yun said. "So we're studying each other then." Another moment of silence stretched between them. Kirith expected awkwardness, as her databases suggested humans experience discomfort in quiet moments. But Do-Hyun seemed perfectly content, his breathing slow and even, his posture relaxed. Finally, Kirith had to ask, "Your statement about rain, what data were you attempting to convey?" Do-Yun's smile widened slightly. "No data. It was just an observation, a feeling." "Feelings do not qualify as scientific observations," Kirith stated. "No," Do-Yun agreed, "but they're still important." He stood up then, stretching slightly. "I should get back. Early shift tomorrow. But thank you for letting me sit with you, Kirith. It was nice." He walked toward the door, leaving Kirith alone with her confusion. As the door slid shut behind him, she replayed his words again and again. "You smell like Earth after rain." 7 words that should have meant nothing. 7 words that somehow created a cascade of processing errors in her usually perfect logic systems. For the first time in her existence, Kirith encountered something she could not immediately analyze and categorize. It bothered her. It fascinated her. It would not leave her consciousness alone. She turned back to the nebula. But now her observations were scattered and unfocused. Somewhere in the back of her awareness, those 7 words kept repeating, like a puzzle she had no framework to solve. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small moment of connection that had just occurred on the observation deck. But for Kirith, something fundamental had shifted. She just did not know it yet. Kirith could not sleep. The Varex did not sleep the way humans did, but they entered a rest state where their consciousness organized and processed the day's information. Tonight, that process kept breaking down. Every time she tried to sort her data, those 7 words surfaced again. "You smell like Earth after rain." She spent the entire rest cycle running searches through every database she could access. Earth's atmospheric conditions during precipitation, chemical composition of petrichor, the technical term for the scent Do-hyun referenced, detailed analysis of Varek's biological signatures and how they might compare to post-rain molecular structures. Nothing explained why he said it. More importantly, nothing explained why she could not stop thinking about it. By the time the station's morning cycle began, Kyrith had made a decision. She would approach this like any scientific problem. She would gather more data. She would request a formal meeting with the human research team and ask direct questions until the confusion resolved. She sent the meeting request through official channels. The response came back within an hour. The humans would meet with her in Conference Room 7 at mid-cycle. Kyrith arrived exactly on time. The 3 humans were already there, which surprised her. Humans were rarely early. Do-hyun sat at the table with the female from yesterday, Hana, according to her file, a xenobiologist. Next to them was another human female Kyrith had not met before, Yuna, listed as a cultural anthropologist. "Thank you for meeting with me," Kyrith transmitted through the room's speakers. She settled into a seat designed for non-humanoid species. "Of course," Hana said warmly. She had a bright, open expression that Kyrith's databases labeled as friendly. "What can we help you with?" Kyrith's light patterns flickered as she organized her thoughts. "I require clarification on a human communication pattern. Yesterday, researcher Do-hyun made a statement that I cannot properly categorize or analyze." All 3 humans looked at Do-hyun. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, a faint color rising in his cheeks that indicated increased blood flow. "What did he say?" Yuna asked, leaning forward with clear interest. Kyrith replayed the words. "He stated that I smell like earth after rain. I have analyzed this statement from multiple angles and cannot determine its purpose or meaning within proper communication protocols." For a moment, there was silence. Then Hana made a sound, a short exhale that Kyrith's databases identified as suppressed laughter. Yuna was grinning widely. Do-hyun had covered his face with one hand. "I'm sorry," Hana said, though she was still smiling. "That's actually really sweet, Do-hyun." "Can we focus on the question?" Do-hyun said from behind his hand. Yuna took pity on him and turned to Kyrith. "Okay, so this is actually a perfect example of something uniquely human. Do-hyun was giving you a compliment." "A compliment," Kyrith repeated. Her databases defined it as an expression of praise or admiration. How does an olfactory comparison to precipitation-affected soil constitute praise? "Because," Hana explained, "rain on Earth smells amazing, especially after a dry period. It's one of the most comforting, peaceful scents in human experience. When Do-hyun said you smell like rain, he was saying your presence is pleasant and calming." Kyrith processed this information. "But I do not produce scent molecules identical to Earth's petrichor." "The comparison is factually inaccurate." Do-hyun finally lowered his hand. "It's not meant to be factual. It's meant to be poetic." "Poetry," Kyrith stated. "The art form where humans arrange words in patterns that do not optimize for information transfer." "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds terrible," Yuna said with another laugh. "But yes, essentially. Poetry is about creating feeling and meaning beyond just raw information." "This is inefficient," Kyrith observed. "Completely," Do-hyun agreed. "But efficiency isn't the point. I was trying to share how you made me feel. Your presence in the observation deck was peaceful, calming. It reminded me of home, of Earth after a good rain when everything feels clean and fresh and right with the world." He paused, seeming to search for words. "I was saying that your presence felt like coming home." Kyrith's consciousness fragmented for a moment, her light patterns scattering across her surface in chaotic waves. The other humans noticed immediately, concern crossing their faces. "Are you all right?" Hana asked. Kyrith forced her patterns back into order. Yes, I am experiencing processing difficulties. The concept you describe, using factually inaccurate statements to convey emotional states, is foreign to Virex communication. Your people don't do metaphors? Yuna asked, fascination clear in her voice. We evolved beyond such imprecise communication approximately 4 million standard cycles ago, Kyrith explained. We share pure data streams. There is no ambiguity, no misunderstanding, no inefficiency. No poetry, Do-hyun added softly. Correct, Kyrith confirmed. No poetry. Hana leaned back in her chair, exchanging glances with the others. That must make communication very clear. It does, Kyrith said. Yet I find myself unable to properly understand your species without grasping these inefficient methods. Explain poetry to me. Explain why you would choose ambiguity over clarity. The three humans looked at each other again. Kyrith was learning to recognize this behavior. They were communicating non-verbally, sharing information through tiny expressions and gestures. Another inefficiency she needed to understand. Yuna spoke first. Poetry and metaphor let us express things that don't fit into data. Emotions are messy and complicated. Sometimes a feeling is so specific, so personal, that there's no objective way to describe it. So we use comparisons. We paint pictures with words. When I say you smell like rain, Do-hyun continued, I'm sharing something that pure data can't capture. The memory of standing outside during the first rain after a hot summer. The relief, the freshness, the way everything seems to wake up and breathe. That whole experience, that whole feeling. I tried to share it with you in 7 words. But the words are inaccurate, Kyrith insisted. The words are true in a different way, Hana said. Not factually true, emotionally true. Truth isn't always about data, Kyrith. Sometimes it's about connection. Kyrith sat very still, processing this. Her entire species had built their civilization on the principle that data was the only truth that mattered. Objective, measurable, pure. The idea that there could be other kinds of truth felt dangerous. Revolutionary, impossible. And yet. I wish to understand this better, she transmitted. Will you teach me? All three humans smiled. Of course, Yuna said. Though I should warn you, poetry isn't something you learn like a science. It's something you experience. I do not have the biological capability for human experiences, Kyrith pointed out. No, Do-hyun agreed. But you're already experiencing something, aren't you? That's why you called this meeting. You couldn't let those 7 words go. That's the first step. He was right. Kyrith had spent an entire rest cycle unable to process those words, unable to categorize them, unable to file them away. They had bothered her, intrigued her, changed something in how she thought. What is the next step? She asked. Hana grinned. The next step is we show you why humans are so inefficient. Come on, we're taking you on a tour of human chaos. Over the next several hours, the three humans led Kyrith through parts of the station she had never visited. They showed her the recreation room where off-duty crew members played games that had no purpose except enjoyment. They took her to the small gallery where humans had hung paintings and photographs from Earth, images that conveyed no useful information, but that humans would stop to look at anyway. They brought her to the hydroponics bay where Hana grew plants from Earth. Not food crops, not useful specimens, just flowers and ferns and small trees that served no function except to be beautiful. This is my favorite, Hana said, touching the leaves of a small plant with delicate white flowers. Jasmine. It smells incredible, especially at night. What is its purpose? Kyrith asked. It makes me happy, Hana said simply. That's enough. Finally, they took her to Do-hyun's quarters. He activated his personal music player, and sound filled the room. It was organized in patterns, rhythm and melody, but it carried no information, just waves of sound that rose and fell, fast and slow, loud and soft. "This is music," Do-hyun explained. "Another human inefficiency. It doesn't tell you anything useful. It just is." Kyrith listened. Her sensors analyzed the sound waves, breaking them down into frequencies and patterns. But there was something else there, something her sensors could not quite capture. The music created a feeling in the space around them. It changed the atmosphere without changing any measurable data. "I think I am beginning to understand," Kyrith transmitted quietly. "These things, poetry, art, music, beauty, they serve no logical function, yet they matter to humans. They are important despite their lack of utility." "Yes," Yuna said. "Exactly yes." "But why?" Kyrith asked. "Why does your species invest so much energy in things that do not help you survive?" Do-hyun smiled. "Because surviving isn't the same as living." The words hung in the air, carried by the gentle music. Kyrith stored them carefully, knowing they would require much more processing. But for now, she simply let herself exist in this moment, surrounded by inefficient humans and their beautiful, pointless music. Outside Do-hyun's window, the stars watched, and somewhere deep in Kyrith's crystalline consciousness, something new was beginning to grow. The following weeks changed everything for Kyrith, though she did not realize it at first. She continued her research on humans, but her methods shifted. Instead of analyzing them from a distance, she began spending time with them, observing them in their natural behaviors, watching not just what they did, but how they existed. She found herself in the engineering bay one morning watching Junho work. The engineer had the kind of broad, steady presence that made others feel calm. He was repairing a maintenance drone that had malfunctioned during a routine inspection. Kyrith's scanners indicated the drone was old, past its recommended service life by 3 standard cycles. "Why are you repairing this unit?" Kyrith asked. "Replacement drones are available in storage. It would be more efficient to simply requisition a new one." Junho looked up from his work, a small smile on his face. He had grease on his hands and a smudge across his cheek. "I could do that," he admitted, "but this little guy has been with us since the station opened. It's done good work. It deserves a second chance." Kyrith's light patterns flickered with confusion. "The drone is not a biological entity. It cannot deserve anything. It has no consciousness." "Maybe not the way we think of consciousness," Junho said, returning his attention to the drone's internal systems. "But it has, I don't know, personality. See this scratch here? It got that saving someone from a hull breach in Section 12. And these worn treads? That's from 5 years of loyal service in the maintenance tunnels." He worked in silence for a moment, his hands gentle and precise. "Besides, I like fixing things. It's satisfying. Taking something broken and making it whole again, there's something good about that." Kyrith watched him work for another hour. His movements were efficient, yes, but there was something else, too. Care, attention, even affection for this simple machine. When he finally finished and the drone powered back online, running its diagnostic programs successfully, Junho patted its metal frame like one might pat a pet. "There you go, buddy," he said softly. "Good as new." The drone beeped, a simple acknowledgement sound, and rolled away. Junho watched it go with satisfaction on his face. Kyrith stored the entire interaction in her memory banks, marking it as significant, though she could not quite explain why. Later that week, she visited Hana in her quarters. The biologist had converted half her living space into a small garden. Plants from Earth grew in carefully tended containers, filling the air with organic scents that Kyrith's sensors cataloged automatically. "These specimens serve no research purpose," Kyrith observed. "Yet you dedicate significant time to their maintenance." Hana was watering a cluster of small purple flowers. "They're lavender," she explained. They smell wonderful, and they remind me of my grandmother's garden back home." She paused, her expression growing distant and soft. "She died 2 years ago. I can't visit her grave. I'm out here among the stars, but I can grow her flowers and remember her." She touched one of the delicate blooms gently. "Besides, I talk to them. It helps me think." "Plants cannot process verbal communication," Kyreth stated. "I know," Hannah said with a smile, "but I can. Sometimes saying things out loud helps me understand my own thoughts, and the plants don't judge me or interrupt me. They just grow and bloom and make my space beautiful." Kyreth observed as Hannah moved from plant to plant, speaking softly to each one. She told them about her day. She mentioned missing Earth. She talked about an experiment that was not working correctly and tried to puzzle through solutions out loud. The plants, of course, said nothing back, but Hannah's body language relaxed as she worked. Her breathing became slower and deeper, and by the end of her watering routine, her face looked peaceful. "Inefficient," Kyreth noted, "but effective." Hannah laughed. "That might be the most human thing I've ever heard you say." The observation stuck with Kyreth. Was she beginning to sound human? The thought troubled her, or perhaps excited her. She was not entirely sure which. She began noticing Do-Yun's habits, too. The xenolinguist had a routine every afternoon. He would stop his work, put on something called headphones, and sit very still for exactly 30 minutes. The first time Kyreth observed this, she assumed he was processing data or entering a meditation state. One day, curiosity drove her to ask, "What function does this daily pause serve?" Do-Yun removed his headphones. "I'm listening to music. Want to try?" Before Kyreth could decline, he had adjusted the headphones to fit her different head structure and activated the device. Sound filled her auditory sensors, a complex arrangement of instruments and human voice, organized in patterns that her databases immediately began analyzing. But beneath the analysis, something else happened. The music created a sensation she had no framework for. It was not unpleasant. It was moving, literally moving, as the rhythm seemed to pulse through her crystalline structure, but also moving in some deeper way, touching parts of her consciousness that had never been touched before. When the song ended, Do-Hyun was watching her carefully. "What did you think?" "I think," Kyreth transmitted slowly, "that I do not have adequate words for what I think." Do-Hyun's smile was gentle and understanding. "That's usually when humans turn to poetry." Over the following days, Kyreth found herself seeking out these moments of human inefficiency. She watched Yuna sketching in a notebook during her break, creating images of the nebula outside the observation deck. She observed crew members laughing together over meals, sharing stories that conveyed no useful information, but that made them happy. She listened to more music, each piece creating different sensations in her consciousness, and she began to change. It started small. She caught herself using words like beautiful and interesting in her research notes. She paused at the observation deck window not to collect data, but simply to watch the stars. She felt something when Do-Yun smiled at her, a kind of warmth that had no scientific explanation. Then came the communication from the Varex Council. Kyreth was in her quarters when the message arrived, transmitted directly to her consciousness through quantum channels. The Council's collective voice filled her mind, mathematical and precise and cold. "Researcher Kyreth, your recent reports have been reviewed. They contain concerning irregularities." Kyreth's light patterns stilled. "What irregularities?" "Subjective observations, emotional language, unscientific terminology. Your report from Cycle 247 described the human practice of music as moving. Your report from Cycle 251 called human artwork beautiful. These are not acceptable analytical terms." I was attempting to convey observations that standard scientific language could not properly capture, Kyreth explained. That is precisely the problem, the council stated. You are being contaminated by human perspectives. You are losing your objectivity, your clarity, your logic. The word contaminated echoed through Kyreth's consciousness. Was that what was happening? Had the humans infected her with their inefficiency, their emotions, their illogical beauty? We are concerned, the council continued. You must decide, researcher Kyreth. Either complete your research using proper Varex methodology or request immediate replacement. We cannot accept corrupted data. The connection terminated, leaving Kyreth alone with her thoughts. She sat in her quarters, her light patterns flickering with uncertainty. The council was right. She had changed. She was no longer the pure, logical scientist who had arrived at this station months ago. The proper response was clear. She should acknowledge the contamination, request quarantine protocols, and purge these inefficient thought patterns from her consciousness. Return to logic, to purity, to efficiency. Instead, she found herself thinking about Rain. About Do-hyun's gentle voice saying those 7 words that had started everything. About Junho's care for a simple drone. About Hana talking to her plants. About music that moved through her crystalline structure like water through stone, changing her in ways she could not measure but could definitely feel. The humans had contaminated her. That was undeniable. But contamination implied something negative, something harmful. What she felt was not harmful. It was expanding. Like her consciousness had been a small room, and the humans had shown her there were doors she never knew existed. Kyreth made her decision. She stood and left her quarters, moving through the station's corridors with purpose. She found Do-hyun in the linguistics lab, working late as he often did. He looked up when she entered, surprise and then concern crossing his face. Kyreth? Is everything okay? No, she transmitted. Everything is not okay. I need your help. Do-hyun immediately set aside his work. What's wrong? Kyreth's light patterns swirled with colors she had never produced before. Confusion and fear and something else, something that might have been hope. I am changing. Your species is changing me. The Varex Council calls it contamination. They say I must either return to pure logic or be replaced. She paused, and when she spoke again, her transmitted voice was quieter. But I do not want to return. I do not want to forget what I have learned. I do not want to stop hearing music or seeing beauty or understanding poetry, even if it is inefficient, even if it is illogical. I want to keep learning what it means to be more than data. Do-hyun stood slowly, his expression serious. That's a dangerous thing you're saying. Going against your entire species' way of thinking. I know, Kyreth said. That is why I need help. Help me understand what I am becoming. Help me find words for what I am feeling. Help me be brave enough to choose this path, even if it means losing everything I was before. For a long moment, Do-hyun said nothing. Then he smiled. Not his usual gentle smile, but something fiercer and more determined. Okay, he said. Let's show the council what happens when logic learns to dance with poetry. Outside the window, the nebula swirled in its eternal dance of creation and destruction. And inside the linguistics lab, a new kind of transformation was beginning, one that might change not just one researcher, but the future of 2 species learning to understand each other. Do-hyun called a meeting, not an official one. Humans did not always follow official protocols. He simply sent messages to Hana, Yuna, and Junho, asking them to gather in the observation deck after their shifts ended. When Kyreth arrived, all 4 humans were already there, sitting in a loose circle near the great window where the nebula painted them all in shades of purple and red. Thank you for coming, Kyreth transmitted. Her light patterns were subdued, uncertain. I realize I am asking much of you. You're asking us to explain humanity, Yuna said with a wry smile. We've been trying to do that ourselves for thousands of years, but we'll give it our best shot. Kireth settled into the circle. She had been preparing for this conversation, organizing her questions into logical categories. But now, surrounded by these humans who had changed her so fundamentally, she found all her careful organization falling apart. I do not understand, she finally said. Your species is inefficient, emotional, illogical. You waste resources on things that serve no survival purpose. You make decisions based on feelings rather than data. You value subjective experiences over objective truth. By every measure the Galactic Coalition uses to assess species capability, you should have failed. You should never have survived your own planet, much less reached the stars. She paused, her patterns flickering faster. Yet you succeeded where species far more advanced have plateaued. You innovate in ways that pure logic cannot explain. You accomplish impossible things. How? How does inefficiency create success? The humans exchanged those quick, meaningful glances again. Junho spoke first, his deep voice calm and thoughtful. Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe it's not about efficiency versus inefficiency. Maybe it's about different kinds of strength. Explain, Kareth requested. Hana leaned forward. Okay, think about it this way. Every species in the Coalition is more advanced than us in specific areas. The Vareks have superior logic and processing. The Krell have stronger bodies. The Mothar have telepathic communication. Everyone has something they're better at than humans. Correct, Kyreth confirmed. This is why your success is paradoxical. But here's the thing, Hana continued. All those species have also plateaued. They've reached a certain level of advancement and then stopped. They maintain their civilizations, they don't decline, but they don't really grow either. They've become stable, fixed, perfect in their own way. Perfect efficiency, Dohyun added, means no waste, but it also means no experimentation, no trying things that might fail, no exploring paths that don't have guaranteed outcomes. Yuna pulled out her notebook, the one she used for sketching. She flipped through pages filled with drawings of the station, of Earth, of alien species they had encountered. When humans first evolved, we were terrible at surviving. We weren't the fastest or strongest or smartest creatures on Earth. We should have gone extinct 100 times over. Yet you did not, Kyreth observed. Because we could imagine things that didn't exist yet, Yuna said. She held up one of her sketches, a picture of ancient humans sitting around a fire. We painted on cave walls before we knew why we painted. We created music before we had written language. We looked at the stars and dreamed of touching them thousands of years before we had any science that said it was possible. Junho nodded. We built our entire civilization on hope and creativity and stubborn refusal to accept limitations. When logic said something was impossible, we did it anyway because we could imagine it being possible. Kyreth processed this. But hope is not logical. Creativity is unpredictable. These are not reliable methods. No, Dohyun agreed. They're not reliable, but they're powerful. Let me give you an example. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the nebula. Every expert said we'd never achieve faster-than-light travel with our level of technology. The math didn't work. The resources weren't there. It was impossible. But you achieved it, Kyreth stated, because a human engineer looked at the impossible math and thought, what if we're asking the wrong question? Do-Yun turned back to face her. She approached the problem sideways, creatively, using intuition and wild leaps of logic that no computer would ever make, and she found a solution that the correct logical path never would have discovered. Hana added, that's what humans do. We fail constantly. We try ridiculous things. We waste enormous amounts of time on ideas that don't work. But every so often, one of those ridiculous ideas changes everything. Your species thrives on chaos, Kyrith said slowly. We thrive on possibility, Yuna corrected gently. Chaos is just what possibility looks like before it becomes something real. Silence fell over the group. Outside, the nebula continued its slow dance of stellar formation, chaos becoming stars, possibility becoming reality. Kyrith watched it with new understanding. This is why you confuse me, she finally transmitted. I have been trying to study humanity as if you were a logical problem to solve, but your strength is not in your logic. It is in everything that logic cannot touch. Exactly, Do-hyun said softly. He came back to the circle and sat down. Logic is important. Science is important. But they're not everything. The things that make us most human, love, art, hope, dreams, curiosity, the stubborn belief that we can make things better, those don't fit into data streams. Junho smiled. That's why I fix old drones instead of replacing them. It's not efficient, but it reminds me that things have value beyond their function. They have history. They have stories. That's why I grow flowers, Hana said. They remind me that beauty matters, that life is worth tending, even when it serves no practical purpose. That's why I sketch, Yuna added. Creating something from nothing. That's as close as we get to magic. It's proof that we're more than just survival machines. Do-hyun met Kyrith's gaze. And that's what I meant about the rain. I wasn't trying to give you data. I was trying to share something that data can't capture, the feeling of connection, of recognition, of finding something unexpectedly meaningful in a random moment. Kyrith's light patterns swirled with complex emotions she was still learning to name. When you said I smelled like earth after rain, you were offering me poetry. Yes, Do-hyun confirmed, and poetry is inefficient communication that conveys truths logic cannot express. Yes. And these truths, hope, beauty, creativity, connection, these are what make humanity successful despite your logical disadvantages. Yes. Kyrith sat very still. Her entire world was reorganizing itself around these new understandings. Everything she had been taught, everything the Varex believed about perfection and efficiency and logic, it was not wrong exactly, but it was incomplete. I understand now, she transmitted quietly, or I am beginning to understand. You survive because you can imagine better futures. You thrive because you try impossible things. You succeed because you value meaning alongside function, beauty alongside utility, hope alongside reason. And you, Yuna said gently, are learning to do the same thing. Kyrith's patterns flickered with something that might have been fear. My people will not accept this change. They will see it as corruption. Maybe, Hana acknowledged. Or maybe you're not being corrupted. Maybe you're evolving. Evolution is supposed to move toward greater efficiency, Kyrith argued. Who decided that? Junho asked. Maybe evolution is supposed to move toward greater capacity for experience, for understanding, for connection. Maybe your people stopped evolving when they reached perfect efficiency. Maybe they need what you're learning, how to be more than just logical. Do-hyun added, you asked us to help you be brave, but Kyrith, you're already being brave. You're choosing growth over safety, change over comfort, possibility over perfection. That's the most human thing anyone can do. Outside the window, a star was being born in the nebula's heart. Kyrith watched the process, cosmic chaos organizing itself into new light, new heat, new possibilities. Exactly like what was happening inside her own crystalline consciousness. I do not know how to write my report, she admitted. How do I explain this to the council in terms they will accept? How do I convey truth that exists beyond data? The four humans looked at each other. Then Yuna smiled. You do it the same way Do-hyun started all of this. You use poetry. You tell them the truth in ways that facts alone never could. You show them, Hana said. that there's more than one kind of perfection. You trust, Junho added, that something in them will recognize what you've found, even if their logic says it's impossible. Do-Yun stood and offered Kirith his hand, a human gesture of connection and support. After a moment, she reached out with one of her appendages and touched his palm. The contact meant nothing scientifically, but it meant everything in all the ways that mattered beyond science. "We'll help you," he said. "We'll show the Varex Council what happens when logic learns to listen to its heart, even if they don't have hearts the way we do." Kirith's light patterns brightened, shifting into colors of determination and hope. "Then let us begin. Let us write something that has never been written before, a report that speaks in both data and dreams." The five of them gathered closer, human and alien working together, preparing to show the galaxy that evolution had more than one direction, that perfection had more than one face, that truth could be found not just in what could be measured, but in what could be felt, imagined, and hoped for. And somewhere in the cosmos, the stars watched and waited to see what would happen when logic finally learned to dance. For 3 days, Kirith worked on her report. The humans helped, but they could not write it for her. This had to come from her own consciousness, her own understanding, her own transformation. She had to find the words that would bridge two completely different ways of seeing the universe. The Varex Council had given her a deadline: submit a final report recommending either full integration of humanity into the coalition or their classification as a potentially disruptive influence requiring quarantine. The decision would affect not just humans, but the entire future of the galaxy. No pressure, as Yuna had said with dark humor. Kirith sat in the observation deck, the place where everything had started. Do-Hyun was with her, sitting quietly nearby, not interrupting but simply present. She had learned from humans that sometimes the most helpful thing was just to be there. "I am afraid," she transmitted. It was the first time she had admitted fear so directly. "What if my report fails? What if the Council cannot understand? What if they reject everything I have learned?" Do-Hyun was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What if they do understand? What if you're giving them something they didn't know they needed?" "That seems unlikely." "So was us having this conversation 3 months ago," Do-Hyun pointed out. "So was you learning to appreciate music and poetry. So was a human reaching the stars. Unlikely things happen all the time. That's kind of the point." Kirith's light patterns shifted in what she had learned was amusement. "You are using hope as a logical argument." "I'm using hope because logic isn't enough," Do-Hyun replied. "Sometimes you have to leap and trust that you'll find ground on the other side." That night, Kirith finished her report. She read it over 7 times, checking every word, every phrase. It was unlike anything any Varex had ever written. It contained data and analysis, yes, but it also contained something more. Something that could only be called truth of a different kind. She submitted it to the Council and waited. The response came faster than she expected. Within hours, she received a summons. Not a simple communication this time, but a full Council convocation. They wanted to speak with her directly, all 17 members of the Varex governing body, their collective consciousness focused on her across light years of space. Kirith stood in the communications room, her form connected to the quantum relay. The Council's presence filled the space like a weight, mathematical and precise and utterly overwhelming. "Researcher Kirith," they spoke as one. "We have reviewed your report." "Yes, Council. It is highly irregular." "I know, Council. You have included subjective observations, emotional terminology, concepts that cannot be quantified or measured. You have written sections that appear to be poetry." Kirith's light patterns held steady. "Yes, Council. because the truth I discovered cannot be expressed in pure data alone. Silence. Then, explain. And so she did. Kirith spoke of her months among the humans. She described Junho repairing the old drone with care and affection, Hana growing flowers to remember her grandmother, Yuna sketching beauty she saw in the cosmos, Do-Yun listening to music that conveyed no information but created meaning anyway. She explained how humans had achieved the impossible not through superior logic, but through creativity, hope, and stubborn belief in what could be. She detailed their ability to imagine futures that did not yet exist and then work toward making them real. For millions of cycles, we Varex have believed that we reached perfection, Kyreth transmitted. We eliminated emotion. We achieved pure logic. We became perfectly efficient. And in doing so, we stopped growing. We stopped evolving. We stopped dreaming of what we might become. Her light patterns brightened with conviction. The humans showed me that there is more than one kind of perfection, more than one kind of truth. Data can tell us what is, but only imagination can tell us what could be. Only hope can drive us toward what should be. Only beauty can remind us why any of it matters. You have been contaminated, the council stated. No, Kyrith replied firmly. I have been transformed. There is a difference. More silence. Kyrith could feel the council processing, their collective consciousness analyzing her words from every possible angle. This was the moment. Either they would understand, or they would declare her unfit and replace her. Finally, one council member spoke individually, a rare occurrence. Your report includes a personal testimony. You wrote that learning from humans has given you something we Varex have not experienced in millions of cycles. Yes, Kyreth confirmed. I learned to hope. I learned to see beauty. I learned that connection and meaning matter as much as survival and efficiency. I learned... She paused, searching for the right words. I learned what it means to be alive, not just to exist. Another council member spoke. You recommend full integration of humanity into the coalition. You further recommend an unprecedented cultural exchange program. I do, Kyreth said, because we need what they have. Our species has stagnated. We are perfect, but frozen. The humans can teach us how to grow again, how to imagine again, how to become more than we are. A third council member. This is dangerous. It contradicts everything we have built our civilization upon. Yes, Kyreth agreed. It is dangerous. It is inefficient. It is illogical. It is also necessary. The council fell silent again. Kyreth waited, her patterns still and calm, despite the fear churning in her consciousness. She had done everything she could. The rest was beyond her control. Then something unprecedented happened. The council did not speak as one voice. Instead, multiple members began discussing among themselves. Kyrith could feel their collective consciousness fragmenting into individual perspectives, each processing her report differently, each reaching different conclusions. They were experiencing disagreement. For the first time in recorded Varex history, the council was not in perfect consensus. Finally, the eldest council member spoke. Researcher Kyreth, your report has created what humans would call a debate. This has not occurred in our council for 3 million cycles. Kyreth's patterns flickered with hope. Is that acceptable? We do not know, the council member admitted. But it is interesting. Another member added, your transformation is troubling. It is also compelling. You have achieved something we thought impossible. You have evolved beyond our species' evolutionary plateau. The question before us, a third member said, is whether this evolution is aberration or advancement. The eldest spoke again. We cannot reach consensus. Therefore, we will do something we have not done in eons. We will experiment. We will test your hypothesis. Kyreth's entire being brightened. You will approve the cultural exchange? We will authorize a limited program, the council confirmed. 5 VAR-X volunteers will be selected to study with the humans. We will observe their transformations. We will collect data. And then we will decide if this path is worth pursuing. It was not everything Kyreth had hoped for, but it was more than she had dared to expect. Thank you, Council. Do not thank us yet, the eldest warned. You will lead this program. You will be responsible for your fellow VAR-X. If this experiment fails, if the contamination proves harmful rather than helpful, it will end, and you will bear the consequences. I understand, Kyreth transmitted. I accept this responsibility. The connection began to fade. But before it ended completely, the eldest council member spoke once more, privately, just to Kyreth. I read the section of your report where you described the humans' first words to you. You smell like earth after rain. I have been processing that phrase since I read it. I do not understand it, but I want to. Perhaps that is what you meant about hope. Then the council was gone, leaving Kyreth alone in the communications room. For a long moment, she simply stood there, processing what had happened. Then she left the room and went to find Do-Yun. He was in the observation deck, of course. Hana, Yuna, and Junho were with him. They all turned as Kyreth entered, hope and worry clear on their faces. Well? Hana asked. Kyreth's light patterns exploded into the brightest, most complex display she had ever created. Colors of joy, relief, excitement, and hope all swirling together. They said yes. Not to everything, but to enough. We have permission to begin. The humans erupted in celebration. Junho laughed, Yuna cheered. Hana wiped tears from her eyes, and Do-Hyun smiled that gentle smile that had started everything, walking over to stand beside Kyreth. You did it, he said quietly. We did it, Kyreth corrected. I could not have found these words, these concepts, these truths without you, without all of you. They stood together at the window, watching the nebula swirl in its eternal dance, human and alien, logic and poetry, data and dreams, together. So what happens now? Yuna asked. Now we teach, Kyreth said. We show other VAR-X what you have shown me. We bridge the gap between our species. We prove that different kinds of thinking can make each other stronger rather than weaker. Junho grinned. No pressure. Exactly the right amount of pressure, Kyreth replied, and the humans laughed at her attempt at humor. As the evening cycle deepened, they sat together in comfortable silence. Kyreth had learned from humans that not every moment needed to be filled with communication. Sometimes the most meaningful thing was simply to exist together, sharing space and time and the vast beauty of the cosmos. Do-Hyun broke the silence eventually. Can I ask you something? Of course, Kyreth replied. That first night, when I said you smelled like rain, did you understand it was a compliment? Kyreth's patterns shifted to something soft and warm. No, I did not understand it at all. It made no logical sense. It served no clear purpose. It conveyed no useful data. She paused, and when she continued, her transmitted voice was gentle. But it changed everything anyway. Those 7 words opened a door I did not know existed. They started a transformation I did not know I needed. They taught me that the most important truths often come in the form of poetry, not data. And now? Do-Hyun asked. Do you understand it now? Now, Kyreth said. I understand that you were offering me a gift. Not information, not analysis, but connection, beauty, recognition. You were saying that my presence brought you peace, the way rain brings peace to earth. You were sharing a piece of yourself with me, hoping I would understand. She turned to look at him directly. And I do understand. Finally. Thank you for the gift, Do-hyun. Thank you for teaching me that there are truths that exist beyond what can be measured. Thank you for showing me how to be more than I was. Do-hyun's eyes were bright. Thank you for being brave enough to learn, for choosing growth over comfort, for being willing to change. Outside, the stars watched their ancient dance. Inside, 5 beings sat together in friendship, proof that understanding could bridge any gap, that connection could cross any divide, that hope and poetry and stubborn belief in the impossible could change the galaxy itself. Kyrith looked at each of her human friends. Junho with his steady kindness, Hana with her gentle wisdom, Yuna with her creative spirit, Do-hyun with his poetic soul. They had given her something her species had thought they no longer needed. They had given her the ability to dream, and as the nebula painted them all in shades of violet and crimson, Kyrith made a silent promise. She would share this gift with her people. She would show them that evolution had not ended when they achieved perfect logic. She would prove that there was always room to grow, always something new to learn, always another step forward, because that was what humans had taught her, not to be perfect, but to be alive. And that, she thought with patterns of quiet joy, made all the difference.